Hello, hope all is good with you. Welcome to episode 4 of the Reflections podcast. Today I have a really fantastic guest for you. Shannon McGuirk is Client Services and Delivery Director at Aira. Not only is Shannon someone who is hugely respected in the industry, but Aira is also a brilliant agency doing some really great things from a cultural perspective. So I was really delighted when she agreed to appear on the podcast. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Shannon about her experiences with imposter syndrome, something she's been incredibly honest about experiencing at various stages since joining the Aira leadership team in 2020. I found this a really interesting and inspirational conversation, and I hope you do too. So without further ado, let's get going. Hi, Shannon, how's it going?
Yeah, really good, thanks, Sean. How's things your side?
Yeah, brilliant. Looking outside the window, and it kind of feels like spring's in the air now, which is lovely to see.
Yeah, very, very small shift this week, I think, hasn't there? I mean, we haven't had to de-ice our cars, which is always a win.
So I just wondered if you could start by telling us a bit about yourself and the role that you do. Something I'm doing with every guest on the podcast now is asking them to give everyone a random fact about themselves, something that perhaps no one else would know about you.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm Shannon. I am the Client Services and Delivery Director at Aira Digital. So we are essentially a full stack digital marketing company that focuses predominantly on growing clients' businesses through those digital marketing channels. We try and keep everything as tied into the bottom line as we possibly can. You may know us from our link building and digital PR work. That's the stuff that myself, kind of Paddy, we speak about a lot. We've been on stages and stuff like that. So I've been with Aira 7 years now, which is quite scary because it's gone very quickly, but it really hasn't either when you bake in a pandemic and stuff as well. So I started out as their first digital PR hire, helped grow the team, I think in our largest, kind of in our heyday, if you like. We got up to the dizzy heights of around 22 people in that team, which was amazing, split into kind of AMs, creatives, and the outreach team as well. Kind of moved into a head of digital PR and content role there. So I was overseeing all of the outreach, production, everything that kind of brings these shiny campaigns to life for clients. And then it was I had to think about this morning, actually. It was in 2020, I moved into the current role that I'm in now. And it probably feeds really nicely into the theme of the podcast, but that is where I have experienced the most imposter syndrome that I've ever experienced in my life, because you suddenly make the switch from being in a role that you are comfortable isn't the right word, but you're kind of the subject matter expert at that one thing, and then you propel yourself into a different role and suddenly you're back and every day is a school day. So I'm sure we'll unpack that in a little bit, but I've been in the role now kind of 2.5 years. I oversee all of the delivery for clients, spanning all of our kind of teams, everything from kind of SEO, creative PR, right through to paid search and social. We've recently just started to really kind of invest in our marketing automation product as well. So working a little bit more closely with the team there on that. But yeah, every day is different, as you all know, Sean, from agency life.
Indeed.
Some days we can be doing really cool and exciting stuff like looking at launching products and stuff like that. And other days it's just sheer problem solving in the role that I'm in. So it's very varied. But the thing that I love about it is that I get to still work really, really closely with the teams and in the teams as well for some of our largest clients. So whether it be launching kind of creative campaigns and stuff like that, right through to supporting the team and clearing down blockers so that they can do deep dives into technical stuff and understand why we're seeing traffic and stuff like that dropping clients. It's it's good fun looking after the team and clients.
Awesome. I don't know if you covered your random facts.
Oh, okay, that's a good one.
Trying to get out of that one.
So this is quite an interesting one. This is kind of my go-to. So I try and keep like work life and professional and personal life a little bit distanced, but a lot of the guys that I've worked with who are in my team, we cover each other a lot. We follow each other a lot on Instagram and stuff like that. So this won't be new to you guys, but to the wider industry, I have a vegan bulldog. So you see, people pull faces like that. So yeah, it's kind of wild. Our bulldog Hudson, he is fully vegan, so he has severe allergies and a certain kind of I guess he has problems with his guts, like he has a gut disease that means he can't break down certain proteins that are in meat. So he is a soy vegetable loving happy boy now that we know.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't know that could even be a thing. But
Exactly, that's why it's a wild fact, right?
Amazing. So we all know now that Shannon has a vegan bulldog.
Yeah,
Excellent.
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So it sounds like, you've been at Aira for a while, and I guess, you've become one of the kind of long-standing trusted members of that team, and had obviously progressed incredibly during that time. And obviously, like you say, you used to be more focused on the kind of PR side of things, and now you're in that role of leadership. Obviously, that's, I guess, why I kind of wanted to talk to you today. What is it that kind of made you want to take that path in the first place? Like, what is it you kind of really love about leadership and working with other people?
Yeah, so I think it got to a point where the brief that kind of Matt and Paddy had set me at the time is to make myself redundant in the PR and creative team. So you see it a lot in other agencies where there's like key person dependency, if you like, or there is one person that like drives that offering forward. And we'd worked really, really hard to scale that team and put systems and processes in place that meant that it got to a point where I could step away from it and it could function without me. And being really honest, like we'd hired such good people that the guys in the team were better than I could be at that point. So it got to a crossroads where like we needed to work out what the next step would be for me in stepping up into that kind of leadership role. And I think Aira was at a really like pivotal point of growth where we were starting to tap onto like the 30, 40 people mark, where you do need a more robust leadership team that kind of make sure, you've got your bums in the right seats, and that they're, for me in particular, like making sure that our team and our people are well looked after, but also we're creating the best environment for them to do the best work for clients. And when we were working out like what the role could be that I could step up and into, because we had like a clear succession plan for our digital PR lead to go into head of and stuff like that, but when we were working that out, for me, we literally sat down and brainstormed like, what are the things, if you took PR out, like what are the things that you almost love about that leadership or that kind of more senior role? And it was working shoulder to shoulder with clients and looking after the team. So that's where my very complicated job title came from. But it means that now I guess I'm in a role that still allows me to have those touch points and work with some of the most talented people that aren't just in our business but are in the industry as well. And I'm very, very driven in terms of like not just problem solving, but problem solving to then see results. So if we can see something working, like how do we continue to scale that? How do we take the learnings from the PR team and make sure that our SEO team, who's following suit in terms of growth and stuff like that, doesn't get tripped up by the same things? And then how do we make sure that our paid team doesn't get tripped up? So it's like that constant excitement around how do we continue to evolve, be better, be a better employer, do better work for our clients. And I think that's kind of where the role came from. And then it was kind of scary when we started to pull together this job description, and I was looking at it like, I remember having a bit of a moment where I was like, this all sounds really good, but this is a big role. Like, this is a big role, and PR was my comfort blanket. So we had to make that transition into that leadership role and make sure that, I guess, I also had a number of people around me that could cover my flanks, if that makes sense. So being very open, I've had to work hard to learn the bigger commercial side of business, because I'm a creative and I work in being passionate about things and being excited about things. But then when you're given a spreadsheet and you have to make decisions based off a spreadsheet, or they have to inform your thought process, that suddenly was very new and very scary, because what the numbers saying versus what the team are thinking and feeling are two different things. And knowing where that line was and making sure that, like, for example, Michaela, who was our finance manager at the time and is now head of finance, gosh, I must have been asking her so many questions and like annoying her, like, what does this mean? And what should we do in terms of revenue per head? And if I do this and hire this person, can I have a view of the next 12 months for this role? And yeah, so it was definitely a bit of a journey to map out the role, but I think we ended up at a point where we struck the balance between people, delivery, and also just making sure that the team, I guess around me at that time, were able to support me get better at some of the leadership stuff that I needed to.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm definitely with you on the finance side of things. That's definitely something I've kind of always shied away from as well. It sounds like you enjoyed the kind of bigger picture side of things, and perhaps it was more when, okay, like you say, you had to kind of look at details within spreadsheets and those kind of more minute details for planning. That's maybe when you kind of realize that those are the areas of development for you as a leader then.
Yeah, definitely. I think like the way that I'd probably summarize it is I was very excited and loved the idea of influencing the greater good across the whole company rather than just working in my little PR creative bubble that I'd been so used to for like 5 years. But when we flipped and I did realize these kind of growth areas in terms of, the finance side of things, or to put it really bluntly, like I was managing, or I was now responsible for an SEO team that, okay, I know SEO because I know where link building and stuff comes into it. I can't do a tech audit. And suddenly my mind's like, well, if I have to talk to a client about the intricacies of a tech audit, I'm going to look like I can't do my job because I'm suddenly looking at a load of keyword research and I don't know what's good or bad out of that in this present moment in time, when you're chucked in the deep end. Or the one that I kind of struggled with the most was the paid media team. Because if you consider the buyer's journey with marketing, you've kind of got my skill set and my team that we've grown organically at one end of the buying cycle, and that's very much awareness stage in terms of like creating those touch points and stuff, to then managing a paid team of, or like luckily again we had a very, very talented head of paid media, but managing or being responsible for a paid team of 6 that had a very, very quick startup mentality mindset, that was very focused on growth, that was very agile. I can't set up a paid campaign. I don't know how to do any of that. So how is this team going to take me seriously? So I felt like I had to go through a period of earning my stripes as well with some of those teams.
Yeah, sure. Okay. But then, I mean, I've always found that it's actually quite a rare trait to find someone who can see big picture and is able to envisage what the future might look like and be able to set a vision for everyone else to kind of follow, I suppose. Like ultimately, I guess that's the job of a leader, right? Is to
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And I think the other side of that is like I was able to have one of the first things I did when I've like flipped into that leadership role was have one-to-ones with my new direct reports. So our SEO at the time, our SEO lead, our head of digital, who was Harry, who is like arguably my right arm when it comes to some of this stuff now, and also like our paid media lead and stuff like that. And I was very open and said, I'm not going to tell you how to do your jobs because frankly I can't, and I don't want you to ever think I'm going to come in and change things, but here's the things that I think I can help you with. That's people, structure, succession planning, all of the good things that we'd done in PR. Strip out all of the link building stuff and look at the bare bones of the team. How have we scaled it? What have been the problems? How have we got the sales process completely down to a T? All of that. These are the things that I think I can help you with. Where should we start? That kind of stuff. And I think that really helped with the relationship building in particular, because if I was thinking, why am I managing these teams? I can't do a paid campaign. They must have been thinking, what can she bring to the table? Even if they didn't say it at the time, like I'm sure it's something that you think, okay, like how's this going to work? What does this mean?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I guess what you're saying there leads quite nicely into the overall theme of the podcast, I suppose. And, when we started talking about recording this, we were talking about, imposter syndrome and the feelings that you've had around that, stepping into that leadership role. Could you go into a bit about the experiences you've had with imposter syndrome? Like, when did it start? Why do you think it kind of came about? What what does it kind of feel like for you as
Yeah.
well?
So I think I have to be completely transparent, I think I've always suffered with imposter syndrome at like various stages of my life. I think like to tie back into I have a lot of traits of high functioning anxiety, like that. I'm very open about that. And I know that like you're a massive champion of like neurodiversity and stuff like that too. So one thing that I think as I've grown older and started to learn about my own triggers and stuff like that, like you start to realize that actually this feeling doesn't have to be a negative thing. If you know your triggers and you harness it in the right direction, it can actually propel you forward for success, because it's a bit like a superpower if you channel this stuff in the right way, because you have a heightened sensitivity to things, and you push yourself harder in a way because you feel like you've got to prove yourself. So I think, yeah, to answer, like to bring that back to the question, I've probably it's always been a big part of like who I am and kind of what I believe in and what I stand for. But in particular in Aira, and that switch from kind of head of PR up into that director and board level role, the most prominent thing that made me recognize that I am struggling with it in the early days of the role was that I struggled to introduce myself and say my job title.
Okay.
So I could, it's kind of wild, like talking about it now. And I said this to a couple of people in the team that have had promotions, and they're a bit nervous to say like, oh, I do this role. I remember being on sales pitches with Matthew Kay, who is our growth and strategy director, and we were both promoted at the same time. And he was like owning his role, like he was on this pitch, like doing all of this stuff, like I lead the strategy side of things, and he's fantastic, you've met him as well. But I was just like, I'm Shannon and I head up the delivery teams, and automatically like I'd almost demoted myself by not being able to say that I was a director and that I didn't just head up the delivery teams, but I was actually, my head's on the chopping block for them, if you like, and that it's my job. Matthew set out this strategy, it's my job to make sure we complete it for you. So that's probably like the one thing that really sticks in my mind in terms of that early transition. And it's just something that I had to like force myself to recognize and feel a bit uncomfortable with in the short term. Like we have this phrase around, you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable saying my job title because in that moment in time, I don't think I felt that I was worthy for it or with it. And that's where that imposter syndrome was really kicking in, because, everything that I've just explained, like I can't do PPC and I can't pull together a technical audit. I can tell you what all these disciplines do and I can tell you why you need them, but I don't know the intricacies of all of that stuff. So I guess my brain was a bit of a melting pot in the early days of tripping my own self up in those moments. So yeah, that's probably the biggest memory with this switch. And then also like first couple of board meetings as well, when you've got to have that poker face, when, let's be honest, like you're really nervous and you are crapping it in terms of like I'm the youngest person in the room, I'm the only female in the room, and I've got to go and talk through these slides, these points. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I trip myself up? We had a couple of external board advisors at the time as well, and they had like launched businesses and headed up agencies of 100 people plus, and there's just little old me there sitting talking about client churn rates and people happiness and client surveys in that moment. So yeah, I would say they're probably the two things.
I mean, that's incredible honesty, and I think anyone watching this would feel inspired by that, because I think that's something that lots of people go through, or feel like if they were to maybe progress to a role like that they would feel the same, and they would kind of feel that element of self-doubt and imposter syndrome. But did you, or have you, I guess, reached the point where you've kind of been able to overcome that then?
Yeah, I would say it kind of the more you do something, like the more you ride a bike, the more you do anything, the more comfortable you feel with it. So I'm lucky in the sense that like I can be incredibly transparent with Paddy in particular. And I remembered not wanting to talk about it for a little while, because it's like, this is going to be a bit of it's going to make me look a bit weaker, or I'm going to, not be standing up to this big role that, he's trusted me in his company and stuff. And I remember having conversations with him about it, and he was just like, it's normal, happened to me. And I was like, what? You're Paddy Mugan? Like, this doesn't, do you know what I mean? You've been a distilled. And he was like, it's completely normal. Like, you're going through stuff for the first time in terms of like that step up. You're getting comfortable with new ways of working. You're also finding your voice around a table. And I was like, okay, this makes me feel a hell of a lot better that somebody that I look up to and respect as a peer, a colleague, a boss, a mentor, all of these things felt like I did at one point. So I can kind of, harvest that energy and make sure that I do everything I can to firstly know my triggers for imposter syndrome. And if it is, and I think this comes into like the tips stuff that we'll probably touch on as well, Sean, but like knowing your triggers of what makes you think or feel that way is super important. So for me, it was board meetings. So I knew that I needed to make sure that I was ready for every board meeting that I went into in the early days, and that any question that came my way, I could answer it with my eyes closed, upside down, doing cartwheels if I needed to. And that put a level of confidence in me and myself to be able to, 6 months later, 6 board meetings later, the fear isn't there as much because you're giving yourself the structure to be successful and not have that feeling. Of course, you might still get a bit nervous, and of course, there's going to be some back and forth and maybe some difficult questions and stuff like that. But that's also okay. So yeah, we talked a lot about knowing what those triggers were. And then probably the most proactive thing, and it wasn't just to tackle the imposter syndrome, but also to, I guess, supercharge some of the growth side of things and the confidence side of things with me and my role was Paddy was happy to support me with finding an external mentor as well. And that, I think, was where the big shift happened in terms of that confidence piece, or trusting myself and keeping the imposter syndrome at bay, or having an outlet to somebody that I was less worried about thinking, oh, she hasn't really got that one, or, not that anybody had ever given me any feeling at Aira that had happened, either with Paddy or Matt. But again, the way that your mind works, you believe that could be a reality. So having that external perspective to allow me to work on some of these areas in this new bigger role, I think has also been something that's been really positive as well over the last couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. Talking to someone external, I think is a good shout, because they don't have that kind of prior knowledge of everything.
There's no emotion, there's no history or anything like that. And it was really helpful. So my mentor was Lisa Myers, so obviously grew Verve into the successful agency that it was. But one thing that I found really valuable was that and again, there was no reason that I needed to feel like this, but just her also being female. So not that ever has held me back at Aira at all, not that I have ever had any kind of inkling that there's been anything, that has held me back in that way or anything, but just having somebody that same gender had been on a similar path, it actually allowed me to open up a bit more.
Yeah.
So that we could get into the core of what some of these triggers were, so that I could kind of bounce back and
someone you can relate to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that whole thing around self-awareness is obviously incredibly important, and it sounds like you kind of went through a journey to really try and understand yourself. And to be honest, I always think that people, like Paddy said, it's normal, right?
Yeah.
People that don't feel like that, are they kind of covering something up or suppressing something in their level of self-awareness even?
And that's not healthy, right? You try and push something down for so long or pretend that it's not happening. If I had ignored, or Sean, I'm sure you've done it as well, if you'd ignored that feeling of oh, a bit nervous about this, that's going to come out in the wrong way at the wrong time when you don't want it to. Whereas I think if you lean into this feeling and you go, okay, that makes me feel a bit like that. Here's what I'm going to do to make sure that I keep that at bay. But actually, the fact that I have this thought or this feeling or emotion is going to make me better, because I am super sensitive, and you're not going to catch me out on a board meeting. I can make sure of that. All of these things, it kind of comes together in a more positive outcome than it does you letting it fester and then going, right, well, I need to resign now because I can't do this job.
Yeah.
Which is not the outcome that anyone wants.
No, of course. And it's obviously looking at where you are perhaps right in that moment in time, and perhaps the negative feelings that are being caused from that situation, but ultimately you're being put in that role because of, you know, that
You've
they've
been
seen
trusted.
potential in you.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really counterintuitive in a way, right? When you're battling these demons in your mind, like you have two co-founders who have your back, that are pushing you and trusting you with a big chunk of their business, and yet your mind is going, nah, you can't do this. Like it just doesn't marry up. So yeah, it's good to accept that, I think, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Okay, so besides imposter syndrome, what other kind of challenges have you faced stepping into the role that you're in now?
For me, again, to come back to kind of like the neurodiverse side of things, having a very high level of high functioning anxiety has also been a challenge for me to overcome in terms of stepping into that leadership role, because one of the characteristics of high functioning anxiety is that you're able to look very, very far ahead and almost overthink, right? Like you can go, okay, if I pull this lever and do that, this is one of the outcomes, this is one of the other outcomes, like looking at that bigger picture of all of the things you can influence. That was a blessing, but it was also a big challenge for me to overcome, because it would trip me up sometimes to the point where I would overthink and worry, especially stepping out of the PR team. Like, if I don't do this thing, or if I don't talk to that client, this is going to happen. Or if I don't do this thing or do that, then that will happen. And it got to the point where I think I was so worried at times about wanting to be successful in the role. I was trying to do all of the things to make sure that these negative outcomes didn't happen, that actually I needed to trust the people that were in my SMT and that were, you know, behind me as my lieutenants. But because I had that high level of worry and overthinking, I really struggled with that personally at times, to let go and to think, okay, this thing that was my baby is no longer my baby. All of the delivery teams are my babies now. So I've got to make sure that they've got the best environment and the best platform to do all of the work. But yeah, that level of worrying and overthinking was probably the big challenge, because it made it much, much harder for me to let go of PR.
Yeah, sure. That's, yeah, I mean, amazing honesty. I think you talked earlier a bit about, I guess you kind of wanted to make yourself redundant in those delivery functions. So I guess having incredibly competent people that you really trust in those roles allows you that opportunity to step away and do what you're obviously clearly very strong at, which is that thinking big picture and setting a bit of a direction for them then.
It wasn't easy, again, though, I guess I'm a lot better at that now than I was in kind of, 2020, 2021, because you come to a piece where you're like, actually, I can't do all of these things. And we have amazing people in head of and lead roles that want to progress and that need opportunities to progress, and that you have to trust. You have to, like, to go back to one of my favorite books is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And I went through that big process with my team when I tried to pull them together. I bought them the book. I was like, you're going to read this. We're going to thrash all this stuff out. Like, we're going to become a unit, because if we become a unit, we can take anything on. And part of that, us gelling as a unit, was me letting go as well. And knowing that that was okay. And that as long as, I was there to catch people when they fell, it would be fine. And that was my role. It was to catch people, not to make sure that content calendars were up to date, and not to make sure that we were reporting on whatever links and stuff. So that letting go, because of the way my brain is wired, was very challenging.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like elevating them and making sure that, I guess essentially you're not acting as a blocker, but more like an enabler, right? To help them kind of become the best they can be.
Accountability comes into that so much as well, right? You have to get your team to feel accountable and know that you trust them implicitly, and if they and that it kind of perpetuates that feeling of accountability. And I think if I know Paddy trusts me, and that allows me to have the breathing room to make the decisions that I need to then help the heads of or the digital management team that we've got and stuff like that. And you have to constantly reiterate that point, even when you know, let's be honest, agency life, you lose 2 clients in a month and they've cited quality of work reasons. You can't use that as a trigger to then dive back into the team and start shredding stuff up. Like, you've got to take that step back and go, okay, let's unpack this a little bit. Like, what was the client the right fit? Did we have the right team on it? What got us to this point, rather than just diving in and being that kind of dictator that nobody wants to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess going back to imposter syndrome, you talked a little bit about how you can deal with that, and you talked about I guess preparing for certain things that act as a trigger. So how do you think, if at all, it can be overcome? Is that a good way of kind of doing that, or do you have any other tips for kind of getting past it?
So the preparation side of things, like for me personally, that was probably the biggest thing, because that would then have a really positive impact on things like sleep. And, you know, sleeping, resting is really important when you're in a leadership role, because you have to think about so many things for so many other people and the business at so many points, that like your mind's constantly like this. So you have to have that downtime. And I didn't really realize the importance of sleep either until I started to look into the positive impacts of that and exercise and stuff like that. So planning for me was huge, because I realized it was, as you say, Sean, like an enabler for lots of other things to be successful, like my sleep, my routine. It meant that if I did have those big board meetings or whatever it was, I wasn't anxious for that whole day. I was just a little bit nervous before, and then board meeting's done, where are we going next? So that was really positive. The preparation thing. The other thing as well is, like, really for me, do take time to understand what your triggers were. My triggers were like going into those meetings. Other triggers for me as well are so meetings. If I have a lot of meetings, either back to back or throughout the day, like some days, and again, you know what it's like in agency life, like your diary gets completely disrespected sometimes. Like, perfect example, when you come back from holiday and you're like, what's gone on here? Like, now I've got like 2 weeks of being everywhere. For me, that's a trigger, not just for imposter syndrome, but also for the anxiety side of things, because I can very quickly feel like I'm not in control of things. And if I'm not in control, I can't be a good leader, because then you're almost like the epitome of a swan. On the outside of it, to everyone, you look like you're cool, calm, and collected when you've come back in from that holiday. But inside, you're crumbling and you're falling down. You haven't got your to-do list sorted, like meetings, diaries, completely out of control. So that was another thing for me, again, which has lots of like knock-on impacts. But the final thing I would probably say is, like, just let yourself feel that feeling as well. Like, I think that's a really important piece of this, in terms of acknowledgement, in that it doesn't mean you're bad at your job. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. It doesn't mean any of that things. It's like, okay, here it is. I'm a bit worried about this, or I don't feel like I can do it. All right, why has that come about? Probably should go and talk to my line manager about it, because the more open I was as well with kind of Paddy around like the meeting side of things or preparation and stuff like that, the more he was able to help me have that environment to succeed. So now, like, we have weekly one-to-ones, and he'll do random little looks in my diary, and he'll be like, okay, 2 weeks time from now, why do you have 7 hours back-to-back meeting with no break? And I'm like, okay, thank you for helping me catch that. Like, that's a problem. So yeah, they're probably the big things that have helped me. But just, it's okay to feel it. Like, be kind to yourself. It's normal. It's fine. And your boss would have felt it too. Your line manager, your boss, your MD, your CEO, whoever you look up to, they have felt what you feel in that moment. And if they say that they don't, then they're either a robot or they're lying to you.
They put on a very good poker face.
Yeah.
A couple of things there. I guess it boils down, I don't know if you would agree, to that sense of autonomy, which I always think is incredibly important. I always talk about Daniel Pink's drive, the autonomy, purpose, and mastery. And autonomy, I think, is so important for that sense of kind of well-being ultimately, and satisfaction in a role. And I think I talked about both sleep and managing your schedule with the amount of meetings that you can end up having. In a Brighton talk that I did on burnout a while ago, get your 8 hours sleep, because it's so important, right? Yeah.
And so much other stuff ties into that as well. So, like, for me, sleep, I'm not a very good sleeper. I've never been a very good sleeper. I know that I need to go to the gym. So to be able to get a good night's sleep, I need to go to the gym or I need to exercise. So I like, it's very well known, I have that blocked out in my diary, like 6 to 7 in the morning. I'm going to the gym because that's a commitment. If it's in my diary, it's going to happen. So you start again to know your triggers and stuff like that, Sean. I'm probably sure you've got little bits like that that allow you to recognize and have that sleep and stuff. Like you get to a point where you realize that stuff and you think, okay, the team can see I'm at the gym, or they can see that I need to go to that yoga class, or I've got a therapy session, or whatever it would be. Just be open about it, pop it in your diary. People will respect it more. They'll respect it more.
Yeah, I think that comes with experience, doesn't it? And I think actually that as you become more senior and you start taking on those responsibilities, you need to make sure that that time is scheduled in your calendar to make sure you can step away and get that. Yeah, exactly. Get that downtime, even going out in order to let your mind rest and think creatively, right? You don't get that if you're kind of sat at your computer doing work all the time. So.
Yeah. I love the phrase that I read your burnout blog, and this is something that Lisa said to me, so it really, really resonates as well when we first started the mentorship that you've picked up on as well, is that you have to put your mask on first. And I didn't realize that, like, in the early days. I was fighting so hard to overcome this imposter syndrome by like doubling down and working as hard as I could and putting all of the hours in and proving that I was worthy of this role. That actually rest, recovery, sleep, eating well, that's you putting your mask on first. Because not only do you have to look after yourself to manage and work at this level, but you are setting, and this is probably one of the things that like has really stuck with me, you have to set an example for those that are following behind you. So if you're doing 6 a.m. till 12 at night and you're in this hustle culture, they're going to think that's acceptable. That's how they get to where you are, but it's not at all.
Absolutely leading by example definitely is
it's hard though. It is hard.
It is hard. That's been amazing, Shannon. I think there's
incredible, aired everything, haven't I?
No, but incredible honesty. And I think that anyone who is aspiring to get to a role, in a leadership team or any other kind of leadership role, I think is going to take a lot of heart from that. So yeah, thank you. I guess just to sum everything up, if you could give us 3 tips for tackling imposter syndrome in a leadership role, that would be amazing.
Let's keep it punchy. Embrace the feeling. If you have it, it's there. Don't try and like compress that down and fester it, or let it fester within you. Just know in that moment, recognize it, breathe, have a second to go, here it is. Okay. We're in that flux at the moment. That's not a bad thing. Also know your triggers. So again, I've spoken through some of mine, but when you're having that feeling tied into the first point, just write down what you're worried about or what the thing is that you think is tripping you up. And before you know it, you'll probably have a list that you can then identify as your triggers and put into themes, whether it is, looking at your diary and realizing, okay, that meeting every Thursday at 3 p.m. is the thing I get worked up about. I'm going to give myself the space to make sure I'm ready for it. And then, the final thing would probably be just talking to your line manager, whether that is, whether you go into that leadership role and you're head of to start with and you're not necessarily on the board. So you've got your MD or your CEO or your COO, whoever you report into. Once you have embraced the feeling and you know your triggers, go and say, hey, these are the things that make me feel like this. I don't need you to do anything about them. I just need you to be aware, because if I am in that moment and it becomes very overwhelming, I need you to help me make sure that we don't get to that point again. So can you help me keep an eye on my diary? Doesn't need to be a big thing that we talk about, but if you spot some stuff in my diary that doesn't fit, or if one of your triggers is something else, like you see me working long hours, hold me to account for keeping an eye on those triggers, basically. So yeah, they're probably my 3.
Brilliant. Great tip, Shannon. Thank you. If listeners wanted to connect with you, get in touch, ask any questions, how could they get hold of you?
Yeah, so either on LinkedIn, you can find me, Shannon McGuirk, or Twitter as well. My DMs are always open. So I can't promise that I will be able to help you crack your own feelings of imposter syndrome overnight. But here if you ever want to ask any questions and stuff like that.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, thanks for appearing on the podcast, Shannon. That's been really useful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sean.
Great. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye. So there you have it. I thought that Shannon was incredibly honest during our chat about her experiences with imposter syndrome, about some of the negative thoughts she suffers with, about her journey of letting go as she moved into the leadership role, as well as opening up about how high-functioning anxiety affects her. Wouldn't it be great if we had more leaders who had the same level of self-awareness as Shannon? I thought her tips for managing imposter syndrome were really useful, which included embracing the feeling and learning to live with it, being aware of your triggers and doing things like anticipating them and preparing to tackle them, and being open and honest with your line manager and talking to them about gaining the support you need. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, then I'd really appreciate it if you could like it, share it, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. In the meantime, take care and see you soon for another podcast.